Valued listeners, thank you for joining us again. We are now joined by Roman Husarski, who is a PhD student at Jagiellonian University in Poland, where he also is a reporter and blogger. Today we'll be discussing North Korea, touching on Donald Trump and what he did during his presidency, and looking forward to Joe Biden and seeing what will go on with him as president, as that seems to be how it looks it will be in the future. And hopefully jumping into anything else that is pertinent or interesting related to North Korea, which is one of Roman's specialties. Roman, would you like to add anything else to the little introduction there?
No, I'm happy to be here with you.
Excellent. So as we start everything off, how about you give us a brief overview of of President Trump and his relationship with North Korea, and let us know some of your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, President Trump approach was a big question at the beginning, because you probably remember the very aggressive noises between North Korea and United States when the Trump became his presidency. So he kind of show off that he has this capacity to attack North Korea, and this is the biggest nightmare of Kim Jong-un. And Kim Jong-un also responded to him, calling him names like Nektari Michin Gwangi, which means like this old fool is trying to attack us, but we can defend ourselves. And suddenly it all changed. So from the perspective of the international relations, it was kind of surprising because nobody knew what will happen. South Korea was afraid about Trump escalating the conflict. And then it was a big turn. But this is how politics works. So the biggest enemies can become the biggest friends when there is a chance for that. And then there was something which North Korea was really looking into for so many years. So the chairman Kim met with the president himself. First, there was South Korean summits with U.S. blessings. And later, we had this U.S. North Korea summits. And even Kim Il-sung, the grandfather of Kim Jong-un, was really looking into meeting the president for United States. And he was using different channels. This is kind of unknown stories, but he was asking the president of Yugoslavia to kind of send the message to the U.S. and even the president of Gabon. So he was trying this all different channels to get his message to the Washington, and just to say like, hey, let's meet, let's try to sort it out. But in fact, what he was trying to do, he knew that as a leader of the so-called third world, and he was trying to present himself like that, he knew that if this meeting will happen, it will be a great propaganda success for him. And when it comes to these meetings between Trump and Kim, from one side, for the President Trump, it was also a great success because he could present himself as someone who is doing something for the first time, although the result was not clear, and it's not clear at all. And there was a lot of optimism at the time. So people were writing those articles when they were saying like, this time it will be different. Like we saw those meetings in between South Korean leader and North Korean leader before, and it didn't happen with anything almost. But this time it might be different. There was this Greek optimism. But Andrei Lankov, the famous professor who is now in South Korea, he said that time that no, it will be not different. Actually, it will be also just this big show off, but a lot of beliefs in change will give a profit for these politicians, but to change the reality on Peninsula, it is much more complicated, and we should maybe ask the question if it's possible, right? Because North Korea is a totalitarian state, and we have this maybe naive idea that we can change it, and we would like to change it, and they know that we have these hopes that we would like to see a big difference there. So they kind of use it and on their own side. So this is very complicated, but I don't see any real achievements in the terms of the politics.
Let me jump in here.
Please.
So, yeah, you said that you didn't really see many achievements, and I think it's kind of clear that there haven't been any obvious ones. I think at the very least there was a cooling of tensions, right, which is sort of a achievement in all of its own. But, yeah, would you say, though, that North Korea did achieve what it wanted, at least, to get recognition, to get the meeting between Kim Jong-un and a U.S. president, and to, sort of calm down the saber rattling? And, Kim Jong-un is, of course, still in power, and he got a lot of respect, you could say, perhaps from the people domestically and a little bit perhaps internationally. So was it kind of a win for North Korea?
Definitely, it was a win for North Korea. Kim Jong-un, for a long time, he was not active on political arena. And suddenly, after 7 years of being locked in this Hermit Kingdom, as North Korea is being called, he suddenly started to meeting with all of these leaders, with Putin, with Xi Jinping, with Moon Jae-in, and he was very active in the foreign relations. So I think for North Korea, it was a big success. It was a big success for the North Korean ruling elites, because they could use the internal propaganda to show that they are doing actually something, and look, we are meeting with all of these world leaders, like we are legitimate rulers. So for them, it was definitely a huge success, I would say.
Yeah, and they didn't have to give up their nukes.
Exactly. I mean, Kim Jong-un already many times, and his predecessors promised something for the other sides. We had these meetings on nukes till 1992. This is a really old problem. In 1985, North Korea joined the non-proliferation club and was showing to the world that they will not invest in their efforts to the nuclear business. And what's more, they were in 70s, there were conferences for a global peace and denuclearization, global denuclearization in North Korea. And all of this left ideologues were coming to North Korea for these conferences, and they were giving these speeches that the world must denuclearize. But in fact, under the surface, the North Korea already was trying to develop the strategy for creating the nuclear capacity. So when it comes to North Korea, it always play two roles. One is official and other one is internal. And the propaganda is also different. There is a different propaganda for the external world than it is for the local people. So, and it was studied for a long time. Now we have a lot of study on internal propaganda, which shows that it's really different from the outside. So outside propaganda is trying to get the support from all of these nations to show that North Korea is a victim in the international politics. And internal propaganda is all about unifying the peninsula, getting rid of Yankees, and it's about clean Korean race and clean Korean people who should get back their land.
It seems to me that there really isn't much for the U.S. to gain in any sort of diplomatic talks other than North Korea relinquishing their nukes, but they seem to never want to do that. So do you think perhaps the game the U.S. was maybe trying to play was to pull North Korea a little bit towards the American sphere of influence away from China? Do you think that was a possible goal for the U.S. in these talks? Because I don't really see what else could have been accomplished. Obviously, Kim Jong-un and his leadership, they're not going to step down. They're not going to give up their nukes. So besides a cooling down of tensions, what would the U.S. foresee itself gaining from these talks?
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good question. I personally think that there's nothing to achieve on North Korea. And North Korea will not change their stance. And the only thing we can do is deterrence and maybe trying to normalize North Korea by talking with North Korean leaders. But the problem is that North Korea is working in a circle strategy. So their circle strategy is, and it looks always the same. So they start some provocation, they escalate the provocation, and then they seek for some agreement between the sides. Then there is a time for peace, and then again they will start some provocations. And it's very likely that quite soon we will see some ICBM tests or other way North Korea will try to make a noise and grab attention of the big countries to bring them back to the table, because this is their only way they can do that.
Sure. Wouldn't it even be the case that with potentially 99.9% chance that Joe Biden will step forward as president, wouldn't it be right on schedule for North Korea to try something in the first or second quarter of 2021?
So Joe Biden, he didn't include North Korea in his top priorities. And I'm afraid that he will continue the Obama strategy. So he will just ignore North Korea or support sanctions against North Korea. It will be really unlikely that Biden will try to mimic Trump and go to Pyongyang or to other country to meet with Chairman Kim. I think it's really unlikely he will do that. And I think North Korea during the next years will be outside of main task of Washington.
So they're basically just going to kind of exist and only be able to get the attention of Washington and the rest of the world when they are, launching missiles or, heaven forbid, provoking the whole world by attacking a South Korean ship or some such, right?
Yes, that's very likely. I think the North Korea, the more it will be ignored, the more it will try to make something to grab the attention, to kind of force the other powers, especially those superpowers, to come and talk with them. And it serves them both internally and externally, because unfortunately the North Korean system is trapped for the ruling elite. They cannot do many things in that system without collapsing it. So they just repeat this strategy, and that's a tragedy of this country. And on our side, and especially maybe on US side, the tragedy is that we tend to think that we can change North Korea by doing something, by offering something to them. But when it comes to the details, finally, the North Korea cannot accept those helps because it will destroy their image inside North Korea, and they must show that they are defendants of the Korean people, that they, the US is not their ally. So there is an internal conflict. So we saw that already so many times that North Korea actually agree for talking. Like Kim Jong-il said that, oh, this is for the U.S. delegation. Oh, this is our last missile. Oh, this is our last parade. Like we saw that so many times, and that's a tragedy of this system, that it repeats itself in such an obvious way, and we don't want to accept it, because when it comes to communist world, every country changed so drastically, and the Gorbachev could talk with Reagan, and they could start doing something, change the policy of the Soviet Union, and it led to collapse of Soviet Union. So, but the other thing is South Korea. So South Korea kind of felt neglected during the Trump administration, because Trump was all about Kim Jong-un, and recently he was sharing those love letters with Kim Jong-un, and the Moon Jae-in, he didn't have a good relation with him, and there was a Moon visit to the States, and Trump almost didn't have a time to meet with him. So he treated much better the world's greatest dictator than his ally. So now South Korea hopes that new administration will focus more on their issues, and maybe that will be the case. Obama actually really liked Im Myung-bak. He mentioned a few times that among global leaders, Im Myung-bak is his good friend. He visited South Korea also, and I think Biden would kind of follow his steps.
Yeah, very good points there. You mentioned earlier sanctions. Now, how effective do you think these sanctions are against North Korea? Because, we've all heard that China is sort of circumventing them by supplying North Korea with things like oil and different commodities. Do you think sanctions will ever have a biting effect that will ever bring North Korea to a bargaining table, or is it just, all futile?
I am afraid that it is somehow futile, but to some extent we have to do this, because both strategies do not work. If we will push North Korea and China, well, when it comes to China, what is interesting that in 2017, the China actually really started employing heavy sanctions on North Korea, and it was because of Trump politics. So China was trying to say like, okay, please stop, don't escalate tensions. We will manage them. We will do something about them. And they really started to paying attention, and the North Korea was really hit, substantially hit by those actions, because after all, this is more than almost 1,500 kilometers border, and very important border for North Korean economy. And there were so many little scale economics, like microeconomics events going on. So when all that was not completely stopped, but limited, North Korea really felt that there is a pressure. But we saw already that North Korea and North Korean elites are not going to beg for forgiveness or start to implant different policies just because of sanctions. And they would rather starve their own citizens than do that. So I think it should be a middle ground. So we should just put some sanctions, but also put on the bargain table the human rights issues, which Trump didn't, and all of the protesters didn't. So it's a big question if Biden would be able to actually do something about that. But there is a possibility, and there are some NGOs who are trying to, enter North Korea, to go to these camps and bring the help for the most needed. And the history shows that maybe it is possible. Like there was when there was a Sri Lanka conflict, some organizations were operating in Sinhalese prisons and helping the most affected by tortures and abuses. And it came because of some agreements. So if US will try to bring those issues on the table, maybe there is something to do. The question is about North Korea, and I don't know. The politics is also unpredictable. So, but I would say that would be a great change if the human rights issues will be treated seriously.
Go ahead, Verv.
Oh, I was just going to say earlier that the situation in North Korea reminds me slightly of what I had read about Mao Zedong's China. That is to say, when Mao was in power, he had started this process of revolution that he could no longer control. You would think he was the most powerful man in China, but in reality, he was actually a prisoner to the Communist Party and the revolution that he had started. And it seems like Kim Jong-un, even though he's the name that's in power, and he has done many things to purge elements of the leadership to ensure his loyalty, there still seems to be very little, because there's no way to reverse the process started when they painted the United States and the outside world as enemies to their own people for so long. There's really no way for them to reform their position, right?
That's exactly the case. Thank you for bringing that out. That is the big problem, and we should just be calm and continue the deterrence policies, continue the small engagement politics, and like to tell them, like, look, if you want to have our support, we can uplift some sanctions, but you must also do something about those most hurt by the system. Like Vietnam could also demolish their own camps in 2000s, and there was such a amount of people who were released that for a moment in some cities the market broke because so many people entered the cities because they were released from these camps. And I think, like, step by step, maybe there is something, but the system is stable. And it was Zbigniew Brzezinski who said that once the totalitarian system is in place, it is extremely hard to do something about it, because it has this very stable boundaries, and the model of the country is like you said, that even the leaders are prisoners. That's it. Even the leaders are prisoners of their own system.
Which would maybe allow us to change focus slightly from the policies of Biden and Trump. Thinking about how North Korea functions. It's kind of like asking them to totally change their stance on the United States and the outside world. It's like asking the Catholic Church to change its stance on the divinity of Jesus or something. It's too fundamental for them to change. The Pope can't denounce the Catholic Church, right? So Kim Jong-un can't denounce the core propaganda. So one of the things that you are doing currently is you are studying kind of the role of myth in North Korea. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. And that's a thing with the totalitarian states. They ban all religious activities, but then they mimic some of the religious ideas and they try to present themselves as a authority which has some even supernatural powers. And this is the case with North Korea, and there are dogmas. There are for sure some dogmas, and Kim Jong-un cannot change some policies, like for example the nuclear politics, because his grandfather was first to say that this is our way to accomplish the last victory on the peninsula. So Kim Jong-un just cannot touch this dogma. So he must present himself as a real Paek-2 bloodline, as someone who is continue the work of his father, and he can promise whatever he wants to the foreign superpowers, but then internal propaganda would present it as, like this international politicians are begging him, for forgiveness, and he's just playing with the global leaders. So this is a common theme which appears in North Korean propaganda. There is superiority, that look, we are so mighty, we are so powerful that all world must pay attention what we are doing. And this is something what I tried to discover, and also I discovered that the myth in North Korean cinema is almost religious one, because it's so stable. It's just the same history repeated again. And because North Koreans, they don't have any opportunity to practice any religion, any free thinking, any club society, they don't have those initiatives which are so important for the democratic countries. So wherever they go, whatever they do, they will always operate in this mythological structure. Like every aspect of life is kind of fitted into this grand narration, this monomyth, which is the story about the great man Kim Il-sung and the Paek-2 bloodline. So everything's finally relates on that. Yeah, it is a dogmatic country and fundamentalist in a way. So don't think that you can easily just change the image of the American as their big enemy, because it's like angels and devils. It's something like that. It's very binary thinking.
So, as you said, the Kim family has this sort of divine image. Is there any truth to the fact that early on, when Kim Jong-un took over, there was supposedly a kind of power struggle between Kim and maybe some hardliners or other high officials or generals in the government? I think Kim Jong-un was being perceived as perhaps somebody who was open to change originally. And we heard stories about purges and things like that. Is there any truth to those stories, and how much power do the generals and the other higher officials in the government have? Is there really a fine line that Kim Jong-un needs to walk, or he faces a coup, or does he have the power of God in North Korea essentially?
That's a very good question, and it's been debated for beginning of North Korean studies. So what is the real power of the great leader, and how much he is affected by generals? So what we saw in the first years of Kim Jong-un were those purges, and it seems that Kim Jong-un was maybe manipulated by some elites, or maybe there were some factions which were about to change the country policies on more China-friendly. Jang Song-taek, the Kim Jong-un uncle, is the famous example. But the problem is that Kim Jong-un is also the only chief of 2 secret agencies which are operating between generals and between the top elites. So those 2 organizations are also controlling each other, and there is a constant purge of some people. That doesn't mean, of course, that those people who are purged will end up in the prison camp, but they can lose their positions, or they can be separated for some time from the decision-making circles. So it's very bloody and very brutal, in fact. And it seems that Kim Jong-un doesn't have a total power, but his power are remarkably large. Maybe there is no other leader in the world who possess so much power as he. Why is that? Because, for example, he did some decisions which were completely not in the line of the main mythological structures of the ideology, but he could still push them for their own pleasure. And the most obvious example is inviting Dennis Rodman, someone who looks like typical villain from North Korean movies when they depict the US people. And he could just hang out with him just because he likes basketball. So that shows you how much power he has. And there are some noises that actually some people were really angry on him because of that. They didn't like it. And also Jang Song-taek, he probably was very angry about it because he thought that this damaged the North Korean ideology. So this is the example that his power is quite remarkable. It's not limitless because he cannot completely go off main ideological narrations, but he is really in position of doing many things.
Wasn't it also the case that while Dennis Rodman was there, at one point he gave a controversial speech? I think it was the Globetrotters were playing a game, and at the halftime or at some point, Dennis Rodman actually said that he said it before the whole arena, something to the extent of, I'm glad we can come together as friends because, we did some messed up stuff to you. And he actually said, and your grandfather did some messed up stuff to us, which was, something that in the North Korean consciousness is pretty much unthinkable, right?
I don't think Dennis Rodman is someone who is a conscious person. So, of course, he said different bizarre things, but what you must remember, it was all in the circles of the top people in North Korea. So they could handle it. It will be bigger disaster if the public would see that. And it was really separated from the public. Just elites and the children of elites could attend those events with Dennis Rodman and those basketball parties. So, but in the end, that's one of the examples that Kim Jong-un has the power because he didn't do anything about it, and he knew that he can handle that too, that his power is not in danger in any significant, substantial way.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk a little bit about North Korea's relationship with China. So we all kind of view North Korea as sort of this joker character with no allegiance to anyone but themselves. But are they more of like a Joker, or are they more of like a Robin to China's Batman? Are they really under China's wing, and they sort of ultimately do what China wants, or are they this wild card truly that doesn't, care about anyone?
So the China also is not very happy about North Korean nuclear program, and there were arguments that China doesn't want South Korean unification, but actually there are different ideas about that, because even now South Korea under Moon Jae-in is kind of China friendly, and united Korea might be a benefit for China too. That's one argument. And the other thing is China doesn't want conflict, of course, and North Korea is doing a lot of activities which can be considered as troublemaking, right? And the conflict would be a disaster for China, because there will be so many North Korean refugees crossing the Yalu and Tumen River to go to China, and it will be a mess, and China doesn't want that. China would love to see North Korea prosper like Vietnam, like economically grow. And from the Deng Xiaoping, China is starting losing the temper and patience for North Korea, and it's a not such a friendly relationship as as people imagine. That North Korea-China alliance is strong and unshakable. I would say that China would, in the terms of conflict, would not support North Korea, because their economic reliance is not so strong like with South Korea. The economical ties are much more broader and much more important for China than with North Korea. This is something to consider when it comes to China and North Korea. And even when Chinese tourists are going to North Korea, they have some special tours. And there are some examples of hostility or arguing between North Koreans and Chinese people, because Chinese people are a little bit fed up with North Korean policies and ignoring China's call to do economical changes and stop provoking other nations.
Do you think it's the case that China possesses the power to potentially really drive reform in North Korea, or are they as handicapped as the United States is when it comes to this?
So until we will not have a regime change in North Korea, the China doesn't have any ways to actually implies or install their own voices in North Korea. So this is also the reason, why China said that their alliance with North Korea in a case of military intervention is no longer actual. So they don't have any responsibility to defend North Korea in the case of emergency military conflict.
That's a pretty big declaration.
Yeah, that's a pretty big change. So I don't think that China can actually just immediately change North Korean regime, because North Korean regime inside is so controlled. They spy on each other all the time. So it will be extremely hard to just, propose some change. And Jang Song-taek, who was going to China alone in the beginning of 2012 and 2013, if I remember correctly, he could be seen as this threat for Kim Jong-un, because he was doing these deals with Chinese, and he was definitely a Chinese faction in North Korean elite circles. So it ended for him pretty badly, right?
It really did.
Yeah. But if we will have the regime collapse in North Korea, so let's imagine that there is some wild general and he takes the power. They put the Kim Jong-un and his family to prison. Everything is possible from now because the new government, even authoritarian one, can dismantle the North Korean nukes without any problem. Why not? They will take a lot of economical benefits from it, and they don't have this ideological burden on their neck. Is that how you say?
Yeah, the shackles. They don't have the shackles on them.
Yes, exactly. So they can do this, no problem. They can change completely the policies. They can dismantle the cult of the royal Kim family. So then we can see completely a different reality. But until now, there's not a lot of things we can do.
It would seem to be that one of the few situations where the Kim family and the North Korean regime as a whole could actually go into the 21st century and prosper would be to, follow the path of China and Vietnam, where, they maintain the name communist, but they basically just open the markets up progressively and join the Sinosphere as a whole. And that would seem to be really attractive as an option to me. And if I was Kim Jong-un coming into North Korea, that would be something that I'd be interested in doing. So I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts on that, and what prevents Kim Jong-un from just trying to basically say to the Chinese, like, hey, can you help me modernize and let me into the regular world?
So that would be something which everyone would like to see in North Korea. Not only Chinese, but also South Koreans. They would love to see that, and they would pray for that. And they try to kind of convince North Korea that, like, look, you just do these small things and we will give you so much. Like, we already shows our affection. We are just building, this liaison office for millions of dollars, and you are just exploding them. you can just profit so much with just common sense. But there is this mythological structure behind. And Kim Jong-un, when he took power, he said that he will lead North Koreans to the final victory, Choesun-seungri, and that means the unifying the peninsula. So for North Koreans, and especially for this regime, these tasks are still actual, and this prevents them for engaging too much in economical exchanges. Because if, let's say, North Korea will start to grow economically, it still will be 50 years behind South Korea. So they don't want to be a second South Korea in the world. But now the regime can show that we are so powerful in military context. We are winning on this ground. So they also activate, and they also use that for domestic reasons to kind of control the population. They give the population the same enemy again, and then there is a time for the hopes, and then it switch, and they all again say, like, this is all the fault of the Yankees, and we, like, remember who is your enemy, that this time we will show them, and they just shoot another ICBM, or they just destroy some South Korean equipment ship, bombard the island, do something in DMZ. Actually, in 2015 there were so many conflicts in DMZ, and it went kind of unnoticed, but there were some little conflicts, and then they are saying, oh, like, look, but now they want to talk. So, okay, we are of course open for talking. And the circle is, going all the time the same. It's really a mythical state. And it's kind of scary, like, because those sacred regimes, they don't give the citizens many options. So you either fit and play your role, or you are just done. And not only you, but all your relatives and all your friends. So this is depressing that it still exists, right?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of Verv's question. Yeah, it's kind of weird how North Korea doesn't, embrace the Sinosphere, and that kind of leads me to the question of, we all know that the domestic propaganda in North Korea relating to the U.S. is that the U.S. is basically like the great Satan and terrible. But what is the propaganda like dealing with China in North Korea? Is it all friendly, or is there a sort of historical suspicion of, how China has tried to control, the Korean Peninsula for, hundreds of years? And, is there that slant to it? And that's sort of the reason why North Korean people can never really accept their Chinese overlords?
So from North Korean perspective, China today is kind of corrupted communist state, which abandoned the, principles and ideas and Maoism and all, which should be in place if it would be a noble communist state, but it's not now. So, but what is interesting, when it comes to the cinema, you do not see Chinese present at all. Like, from the beginning, it's always the Korean people themselves who are fighting the South Koreans and their US allies. There is no Chinese presence whatsoever. Quite recently, well, maybe not so recently, it was in 2013, there was a movie where North Korean dancer is going to China, and she's befriend with Chinese partner, and it's also showing to the Chinese that they can learn so much when it comes to morality and beauty, and this Chinese person admires, North Korean way of living. So they propagate this moral, idealistic vision that they supposedly represent, and other countries, they are betrayers, they are passenger. They left their ideals long time behind them. And it was from the beginning when, for example, Polish government changed from very authoritarian to more like subtle authoritarian nationalistic. Then Kim Il-sung decided that this is risky, and all of the orphans, North Korean orphans, which were stationed in Poland, in 1939 he just came and took all of these children with them, with his delegation, back to North Korea, because he thought that the softening of the principles and totalitarian practices weak the society. He even obviously, like, he said that to Ceausescu, like, openly, that he thinks that economic growth will make society less prone to be ideological. So it is not good to spoil the society in this way. And Ceausescu was inspired by that, This is the most scary thing. And he visited twice North Korea, and I think once in 1977, and he was really inspired, and he tried to create his own Juche regime in Romania, but fortunately he didn't succeed.
Very interesting.
That's really amazing. I had not thought that the North Koreans themselves were so dedicated to their ideology in the internal terms. Of course, they're going to be dedicated to it as far as it would benefit themselves, right? I mean, anyone would. But it seems like they're ready to go to the mat and fight for it even when it doesn't help them.
Yes, that's exactly true. And the funny thing is that most of the commentators are trying to rationalize North Korea from the economical perspective. The most articles I read are doing that. And in fact, it's funny because it seems that we are more Marxist than North Koreans are. They are not Marxist. They are devoted to their ideology, which is mythical ideology. And we are trying to rationalize all our actions on the basis of economy. And you can even make a larger description that this is the effect of, losing our touch with more value-orientated worldview. So now the only thing that's matter is the economical growth, money, business. So you usually see these articles which are optimistic, and they argue that North Korea, if we will give them the chance for economical growth, they would do that. Why they wouldn't, right? But that's not the case.
Okay, probably getting closer to wrapping up, but kind of shifting gears here. I remember about 6 months ago or so, maybe less than that, Kim Jong-un was in the news quite a bit, and there was suspicion that he was actually dealing with some health problems. There was a lot of rumors flying around. Some news outlets were even saying that he was dead. Were there any truth to those rumors that he was dealing with health problems, do you think? And also, is there any truth to the rumors that his sister was being groomed to perhaps take over? And what exactly is her role in the government? Is she a strong number two?
Oh yeah, that's interesting question, and there's no one answer to that. It will be really hard to imagine that in such a patriarchal society, Kim Yo-jong would lead the country, would take the government, and would gain respect. I actually, knowing the culture, knowing the assets, I cannot imagine that. And also, it is unlikely because take the other communist countries as example. There were no communist woman leader. And I don't think this case would be a difference. And I would rather say that some generals will take power if Kim Jong-un would suddenly die. And as I said, that would be maybe a good shift. I would like to see that, actually, for the reasons I already said. And when it comes to his heart operation, and there were some speculations, unfortunately, made by North Korean defectors. Ji Sung-ho is one of the party, United Future Party member, and he said that he is 99% sure that Kim Jong-un is dead. Well, his informant were wrong, but there was a backlash against him, and this is also said the situation of North Korean defectors is another issue. But the North Korean NK News analysts, they find the propaganda picture released after Kim Jong-un appeared again, when he has the mark on his hand, which suggests that actually he had some operation. It might be related to heart, but we will never know. For sure, he has money for the best doctors and plastic surgeons and other surgeons. I'm sure they brought him some specialists from China. And that might be the case. He doesn't look healthy. I mean, he's obviously obese, and he reportedly smokes a lot. But he's still young, so I wouldn't just hope for his sudden death. But who knows? Like the world is very unpredictable, so nobody knows. I would not cry.
Yeah. So regarding North Korea's health as it stands, we could talk for a moment. Do you know how the coronavirus is performing in North Korea at all? Or is it still incredibly secretive in terms of what's going on?
Yeah, that's another proof that this is a mythic state, sacred state, because the virus is usually in North Korean propaganda connected to foreigners, of course, to Americans. And North Korea just cannot acknowledge that it has inside of their sacred ground a virus. So it's, I think, maybe only North Korea and maybe Turkmenistan, but I'm not sure about that. But the North Korea didn't acknowledge not even one case of COVID-19, which is, of course, from today, it is just preposterous. And there are rumors, there are wild rumors of people being killed, but we cannot be sure. It's just we have only speculations. So it's unfortunate, very unfortunate, because this is not a transparent country. It never was. It's prefer myths over the inquiry, scientific inquiry. So yeah, that's what we have. So this is big question mark. We don't know.
Very excellent. That seems to be the big story of North Korea, is that it is a country founded on myth and oddly enough mixes it up with Marxism, which isn't that odd when you think about it, as Marxism itself has not had a very good track record with the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good observation. And also communist states, they created their own mythologies with, saints, with special behaviors. Some of them are even connected to Orthodox Christianity. They were just mimicking, some behavior to just present themselves as those who possess the truth, who can be a church equivalent for the people, but they failed.
Excellent. So should we wrap this thing up, Brandon?
Yeah, sure. I think it would be good to wrap it up, maybe, Roman, with some predictions from you. So why don't you give us a short-term prediction for North Korea? Let's say, what's it going to be like in North Korea for the next 5 years, and then sort of a longer outlook prediction on North Korea. Let's say 15 to 20 to 25 years later. What are we going to be looking at? I know this is very difficult, but try your best to give us some predictions.
Brandon, I'm really sorry. I can't even predict my next week. So how can I predict North Korea in 50 years? It's impossible. But if Kim Jong-un would not somehow be overthrown, the regime will be stable, and we will see probably another Kim in power in that time. I don't believe in unification whatsoever. There can be a unification made by absorption, but it's unlikely now. And the mass scale conflict between two countries is also kind of unlikely. So I think it will be in the place where it is now. But it's really hard to predict. It's really, we must wait and see. And for the next 5 years, President Moon Jae-in is finishing his cadency. It was disappointing for many people it was disappointing for those who expected some quick change on the peninsula, especially the engagement politics, which was a hope for those who kind of wanted to have the peace regime. 평화체제 also failed. So the new South Korean government would be very important for another 5 years and how the things will go. I think after all, it is more likely that Moon Jae-in successor will take power, because we saw these blocks of power. He still have quite a substantial amount of support, around 40%, which is good enough to win an election. So his successor, I think, will take power, and he will try to continue some engagement politics, but I think it will go slowly. But it's really hard to predict anything in this time. Like, look, we have this COVID crisis, and it also postponed so many things. So very hard to predict. And I'm afraid that North Korea will go back to provocations and escalation of conflict.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your informed predictions on a hard topic that is very unpredictable. And so with that, we will conclude the episode. Thank you very much for coming on, Roman. And I think we'll definitely have to have you back in the future to get more of just a historical perspective or cultural perspective on North Korea.
That would be great. I would love that.
Excellent. So thank you to all of our listeners who made it to the end, and everybody have a really pleasant week. Goodbye.